I guess it's time for another video update since I've reached 150 hours on Dreaming Spanish. I want to preface this video with a couple of things. I don't think anything I'm going to say is going to be very controversial. I don't have anything bad to say about Dreaming Spanish. I've been using it, I believe in it, and I'm still using it every day. We need to talk about a few things. I want to talk about why I'm not what's called a purist, I guess, and why I'm glad I made that choice, why I'm going to continue incorporating other methods into my studying. I want to start with just a quick story. It's about the best Spanish lesson I've ever had. Okay? It happened when I was at work. I should say that this was something that happened a long time ago. This happened before I even made my first video, I think. This happened like a couple months ago. But it stuck with me. It really stuck with me. And I still remember it more than anything else. And so far when it comes to learning Spanish, it just, I still think about it. And what happened was I was at work. And like I said before, I get a lot of chances to speak Spanish at work. There's always people talking in Spanish, customers and coworkers. And I did a basic transaction with one guy in Spanish. And the lady behind him, after I was done, she also spoke Spanish. And she was like, oh, in Spanish. She was like, oh, you speak Spanish, And I replied, like feeling real good about myself, like, yes, I do speak Spanish, I replied, estoy aprendo. And she looked at me, and she kind of looked at me like, she looked at me like I was stupid. And she said, in kind of a condescending tone actually, estoy aprendiendo. And just the way she said it, it was like a hint of like, oh, really? You sound like an idiot. And it was really embarrassing, to be honest. It was pretty terrible. I mean, talking about it now way later, I think it's kind of funny, but at the time I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, like I don't know anything about Spanish. It was like I felt so stupid. Just the way she corrected me was like, like I was an idiot. The reason it stuck with me so hard was because I got embarrassed, right? There was a strong emotional connection to that moment. And that really solidified that in my head. So now I will never forget the word aprendiendo. If I want to tell someone I'm learning Spanish, not learn Spanish, I'm learning Spanish, I will always say estoy aprendiendo. And that was a good lesson to learn. And it really made an impact on me because, like I said, of the emotion associated with it. Even though it was a negative emotion, it was embarrassment, there's something to be said for that, I think. Really, what seems to be such an effective way to learn the language, for me at least, has been, is to interact with people in the language. And yeah, make mistakes and get corrected on those mistakes. Getting corrected and feeling stupid after, talking with a native speaker and saying something wrong or sounding like, like you're talking badly, it's a great way to learn, I think. And, it doesn't always even have to be negative experiences. It's not even like, oh, you have to have everyone treat you like crap because you're bad at the language. That's not what I'm saying. Even positive experiences, I think. I've been on Tandem lately, and I found some really great partners to talk with. And a lot of times, sometimes, I try to get them to do crosstalk, but sometimes we just switch back and forth between talking in English and talking in Spanish, and I make mistakes, but I met some really cool people that are really friendly and really helpful, and those have really kind of bolstered my confidence. And I really enjoy the conversations, and I feel like I've learned a lot from just interacting in Spanish. So for me personally, again, I'm just a beginner, right? I don't know anything about learning languages, okay? I'm not an expert in learning languages. I am not qualified to give any sort of advice in what is the most efficient or what is the most, you know, what's the way to acquire it the fastest or anything like that. I have no idea. I'm just a beginner language learner. But for me, using the language has helped me, I feel like, a lot in learning it. In my opinion, almost an obsession with a lot of people about tracking their hours and getting to a certain point, and there's almost this feeling like, oh, if you get to this number of hours, then a magic switch is flipped and suddenly you can talk in Spanish. Or if I hit this many hours and suddenly I'll be fluent in Spanish. And I really think that's the wrong way to think about learning a language. At least that has been kind of having the opposite effect on me when it comes to motivation. It's been kind of demotivating for me to think like that. I'm just trying to enjoy the process of learning the language and enjoy the language and not be so focused on, I have to hit this many hours and I have to, once I get to this level, then I'll be able to talk at where I want to be, I don't think that's a good way to think about it, to be honest. Now, I still, like I said, I still believe in getting as much input as possible, and it's clearly helped me progress, so much. But I'm trying not to just focus on only caring about how many hours I have and not caring about anything else, because that's it's kind of like losing focus on why I'm even learning it in the first place, right? And maybe that works for some people who have better discipline and better patience than me, but I want to have fun with Spanish, and I want to use it, even if I'm using it wrong or I'm not using it well. I want to enjoy it, and mixing it up and doing different activities keeps it fresh for me, keeps it interesting. Reading or playing a game in Spanish or whatever is helping me stay motivated. It's helping me want to do it. If I have to sit and watch another Carlitos video, I feel like I'm gonna scream, to be honest. And now I'm starting to get into intermediate content because I have crossed 150 hours. So some of the intermediate content is kind of opening up to me. And I found the transition not too bad, to be honest. Now again, I've only just started watching intermediate content and I'm sorting by easy. So I'm watching the easiest intermediate videos. And there is a bit of a jump, but it doesn't seem like this massive, thing that I've heard a lot of people make it out to be. But it may be, once I get a little bit farther along to the intermediate, it'll start getting tougher quicker. But yeah, I still mix in beginner videos. I'm not just, leaving those behind and going into intermediate. I'll now watch a mix of, maybe half my time I'll spend with beginner videos, and then half the time I'll spend watching intermediate videos. So the content has gotten a little more interesting, and I can find, series and videos that I enjoy watching. But as you guys all know, just a lot of the learner content, it gets boring after a while. It's people act like it's so easy to learn using this method because you just got to sit and watch videos. But sometimes it's just not fun, right? And doing other things keeps it interesting for me. So I have been speaking a lot with people and with my teacher, and I'm really glad I'm doing that, and I'm going to keep doing it. So what can I and can't I do still? So speaking is still it's starting to lag behind all the other skills. Speaking lags behind all the other skills still by quite a bit. I've been in classes with my teacher. I've been writing and reading. And so those skills have kind of started to improve a little bit. but I feel like my speaking is still the weakest of like the 4 core skills, right? Like reading, speaking, listening, obviously, and writing. Speaking feels like it's farthest behind out of everything, but that's okay. I think that's just something that will come with time and practice, and the fact that I'm just understanding a lot more is really comforting. Now, speaking to natives, I feel like I'm getting closer to being able to understand when natives are talking to me, but I'm not there yet. I noticed I'm able to start picking out more words that I recognize. Like before, even if I knew some of the words they were saying, it would just still kind of just sound like one long line of gibberish, right? Even if I knew some of the words, but I feel like I'm able to hear more clearly, like the division between words, and pick out words that I do recognize, although there's still a lot of words I don't recognize. And I just feel like I'm getting, again, it's kind of hard to quantify, but it just feels like I'm closer to being able to understand them, right? And sometimes, don't get me wrong, if they're talking about something simple, like the other day my coworker was making small talk with one of the customers just about the weather, and like they were talking in Spanish about, what the hottest month of the year is here, because in Phoenix it's been getting crazy hot, and is it going to be hottest in July, or is it going to get hotter in August? And I understood the conversation, I was able to follow it. It was just, pretty basic conversation about the weather. And I even, turned over and pitched in my 2 cents. I was like, hace más calor en julio. And, so I was able to, in very basic situations, I can understand native speakers, but I can do basic transactions in Spanish. Like I can ask, if they want their receipt, do they want a bag, I can repeat their total back to them, things like that, and I can understand a few basic questions. But once we start going off the script too much, then I can get lost pretty quickly. So obviously I'm taking lessons still with my teacher, and those have been invaluable in my opinion. Now, when I watch a video and I hear a word that I don't recognize, or like a sentence is formed in a certain way and it kind of doesn't make sense why it's structured that way, I don't want to feel guilty about going to look up a word or look up why a sentence is, phrased a certain way. Like I shouldn't have to feel bad about looking those things up, and because it can be frustrating, right? It can be frustrating to be watching a video and not understand a word and just hear it, especially if you hear it like multiple times and you just it's not clicking what it means. That's a frustrating experience. Like, so what I do is I just relax and I just go look the word up, and then I know what it means, and I watch the video and I continue on, and everything's fine. It's not the end of the world, right? And same thing, like especially with grammar concepts, maybe I realize I don't know something like past tense, like I understand, I'm starting to get a grasp on how verbs work in the present, but I don't really understand like when you're talking in the past, how they're conjugated. So I'll ask my teacher about it. Like, hey, what, how does it work when you conjugate verbs in past tense? And he'll give me a rundown. He'll explain to me, like, this is how some verbs are conjugated in past tense, and these are kind of some of the patterns they follow, and this is how it works. And then I go and I watch a bunch more videos, and I get a bunch more input, and I start hearing them, and I start seeing those examples, and it solidifies them for me. And it really, it makes the input more comprehensible. And I've noticed when I do that, like if there's a concept or a word or something that like I didn't recognize, and I ask my teacher about it and he explains it to me, and then I go and I watch the videos, it's like I start seeing it everywhere, and it's so much more clear to me, and it just sticks out to me. Another thing my teacher has been pushing me to do is a lot of writing. and I like writing a lot. It's kind of like speaking, but you get a way more time to think about what you want to say, and you don't got to stress about it as much because you can go back and double check it and take your time and everything. So the writing, has been really helpful. And sometimes what we'll do is, so like I'll write, a story, or I'll talk about my day. I'll write about my day, and then just the best that I can. And I purposely try to go a little bit beyond what my level is. I don't. My goal, at least the way I think about it, when I do the writing assignment, isn't to be like, I want to turn in something that's perfect, right? I want to turn in something that has no mistakes, and is like, I do want to turn in something that probably has mistakes, because that gives us something to talk about, like if I keep the sentences extremely basic, like, mi nombre es Derek, soy de Estados Unidos, vivo in Arizona. Like, I'm not going to learn anything from doing that. I feel like if he's not going to really have a lot of feedback to give me, right? So what I find I do is I'll try to construct a sentence that I'm not really sure how to put together. I'm not really sure how I would phrase it, but I'll give it my best shot. I'll write what I think is maybe correct, what, to the best of my knowledge, how I would phrase it. And then, then we'll go over it in class, and we'll kind of break it down like the correct way, maybe some rules to remember about like why this, how these kinds of sentences are formed, and like kind of give me some key takeaways to learn. And it's really helpful, so I'm always trying to, when I write, to write at a level a little bit farther than where I actually am, because it gives us, things to talk about and things to learn from. And it's been really helpful. Writing also just kind of solidifies things in a way, like when you write something down, I just find I remember it better. And yeah, I would definitely give writing 2 thumbs up. I think it's a great, I think it's a great way to study and learn. And then especially if you're able to get feedback, like I am from my teacher, it's very helpful to be able to learn from writing. Going forward, it's probably going to be every couple months I'll put out a progress video. I'm thinking maybe in between, there's a few ideas for videos I could do. Like I might do what like a typical day of my studying looks like, because I do other things, and maybe just kind of like a breakdown of what my routine for studying Spanish looks like, and maybe some examples of some of the exercises and some of the stuff I do in the italki classes. So I will maybe I'll post some of those videos, because the update videos are gonna probably be at least a couple months apart, because it takes a while to see some progress, and especially as the levels on Dreaming Spanish are going to get farther and farther apart, it's going to take longer and longer to reach them. But one thing, I'm just trying not to worry so much about the amount of hours. Obviously I do want to get as much input as possible. I think it's important to rack up hours, but I don't want that to be like my focus, and like I don't want the number to be the focus, and so in fact I haven't been counting outside input. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. Well, not a lot. I've been listening to like Cuéntame and How to Spanish and Chill Spanish podcast, and started a little bit of Español con Juan. But I haven't counted any of that time to my hours. So my actual hours is, I don't know. I don't know what my actual hours are. And that's kind of the point. I would say it's, maybe like 160, 170 right now. But I've stopped. Well, I never really started, but I don't add any outside time. And I've watched I've listened to 50 episodes of Cuéntame. I've listened to like 100 episodes of Chill Spanish, a few episodes of like How to Spanish, a few episodes of Español con Juan. I just don't count any of that towards my input. I just don't bother adding it in, because I don't want to kind of become obsessed. with worrying about how many hours I have constantly and thinking that, you know, I won't be able to do this, or it's not until I get here that I can do that. Like, no, I'm a free man, right? I'm gonna do what I want. And so I do like, it is still kind of motivating to have the hours tracked, so I do still have my goal and I try to meet it every day. But I'm just not gonna worry about it so much anymore. I also noticed that I kind of been having this fear of like being behind on the roadmap, right? Like, and I'm finding I'm not as I'm moving along. Like, I'm finding I can follow adaptive topics. Yes, I would say I can follow adaptive topics for learners. So, you know, reading through the roadmap, it seems like it's lining up pretty good so far, but I still have this like maybe irrational fear of like feeling like I'm behind or I'm not where I'm supposed to be at, you know, for how long I've been learning. So I purposely am vastly underestimating how many hours I have, actually. Both because I don't want to hyper fixate on it and I don't want to feel like I'm behind at the same time. So, you know, my Dreaming Spanish website says I'm about at 155 hours. How many hours I really have of input at this point, I don't know. More than that. And as I suspect, as time's going on, because I'm starting to get more and more of my input through podcasts now, because it's just freeing, right? Like, I can, when I'm at work and I'm in the cooler and I'm stalking, that's like an hour a day. I can have an extra hour of Spanish in my ear. And, you know, it's stalking's pretty mindless, stalking the cooler. So I'm able to kind of, you know, listen to the easier podcasts while I'm stalking, and boom, that's like an extra 45 minutes to an hour right there. Or like when I'm in the car driving, yes, I put on podcasts a lot of the time. So I'm noticing more and more of my input is coming from podcasts, although I still, of course, watch a bunch of videos, but that's supplemented more and more with more podcast time. And I assume it definitely feels like as I get better that's gonna be even more so the case, that I'm gonna be spending probably at a certain point, it seems like I'm probably just gonna be getting the majority of my input through podcasts while I'm doing other stuff, because it seems like it's kind of heading already in that direction, and I'm not gonna be counting that time. So, you know, the reality of how many hours I actually have is gonna be farther and farther from what I actually have, and I'm just okay with that. Not focused on how many hours I have. I'm focused on enjoying Spanish. I'm focused on these interactions I'm having in Spanish and talking to people, and, you know, just the experiences. And it may sound kind of cheesy, but it's just how I prefer to think about. So, gracias por ver este video y nos vemos en el próximo. Ciao.